The laughter echoed across the glass walls of the 42nd floor. It was loud, sharp, designed to be heard. Daniel Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Tech Industries, stood at the head of the conference table in a tailored navy suit, surrounded by investors and senior executives. The company was about to finalize the biggest merger in its history, a deal worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And then the door opened. An older woman in a faded gray janitor's uniform stepped inside quietly, pushing a cleaning cart. Her hands were wrinkled, but steady. Her dark hair was streaked with silver and tied neatly into a bun. She kept her eyes down as she began collecting empty coffee cups. Daniel stopped mid-sentence. "Excuse me," he said loudly, glancing at the investors with a smirk. "Is this really happening right now?" The room fell silent. The woman paused. "I'm sorry, sir. I was told to clean the executive floor before noon." A few executives exchanged uncomfortable looks. Daniel chuckled. "Maybe next time try not to interrupt a meeting worth more than your yearly salary." A couple of investors laughed awkwardly. The woman's hand tightened slightly on the cart handle, but her voice remained calm. "I'll be quick." Daniel leaned back in his chair. "You know," he said, raising his voice again, "this is exactly why I believe in hierarchy. Everyone has their place. Some build empires," he gestured to himself. "Others mop the floors." This time, the laughter was louder. The woman finished collecting the cups and quietly headed for the door. Just before she stepped out, she turned slightly. "Mr. Whitmore," she said softly, "I hope your presentation goes well." There was something in her tone, not anger, not fear, just quiet certainty. Daniel waved her off. Yes, thank you. What was your name again?" "Maria," she replied. The door closed behind her. An hour later, the meeting concluded. The investors seemed impressed, but cautious. "We'll make our decision this afternoon," said Mr. Calloway, the lead investor. "But there's one final approval we need." Daniel smiled confidently. "From whom?" Calloway adjusted his glasses. "From the primary stakeholder." Daniel blinked. "Primary stakeholder? I own 51% of this company." Calloway gave a small, tight smile. "You did." Silence fell over the room. "What do you mean, did?" Daniel's voice hardened. Before Calloway could answer, the conference room doors opened again. Daniel felt his stomach drop. Maria walked in, but she wasn't wearing the gray janitor uniform anymore. She was dressed in a tailored black suit, her silver hair now flowing neatly over her shoulders. Behind her stood two legal advisors and the head of the board. Daniel stared at her as if he were seeing a ghost. Calloway stood up. "Mr. Whitmore, allow me to introduce Ms. Maria Alvarez, majority shareholder of Whitmore Tech Industries." The words hit like a hammer. Daniel's face drained of color. That's not possible." Maria stepped forward calmly. 3 months ago, I began acquiring shares quietly through a private equity group." Daniel looked around wildly. "Why would you—" She met his eyes. "Because this company was co-founded by my late husband, Rafael Alvarez." Murmurs filled the room. Daniel swallowed. "That was decades ago. He sold his shares." Maria's gaze didn't waver. "He was forced out. By you." The air felt heavy. "My husband built the original prototype in our garage. He trusted you as a partner. And when the company began to grow, you convinced the board he wasn't polished enough to represent the brand." She let the words hang. "You bought him out for a fraction of the value. He signed because he believed in you, because he thought you were his friend." Daniel's breathing became shallow. "He died 2 years later," Maria said quietly, "still believing you'd do the right thing." The room was dead silent. "So yes," she continued, her voice steady, For the past 6 months, I've worked here as a janitor. Gasps. I wanted to see what kind of company this had become. I wanted to see the man you turned into. Daniel felt heat rising to his face. This is absurd. You can't. I can, Maria interrupted gently. As of this morning, I hold 56% of the company. She turned to the investors. The merger will proceed, but under new leadership. Daniel's chair scraped loudly as he stood. You're firing me? Maria tilted her head slightly. No, Daniel. A flicker of hope crossed his face. I'm offering you a position. The room leaned in. Facilities management, she said calmly. You seem to have strong opinions about hierarchy. A few executives couldn't hide their smirks. Daniel's mouth opened, but no words came out. Maria stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. I don't believe anyone is just a janitor. Every role matters. Every person deserves respect. She straightened and addressed the board. Effective immediately, Daniel Whitmore is removed as CEO. Security will escort him out. 2 security officers stepped forward. As they approached, Daniel looked at Maria desperately. You can't do this. I built this company. Maria's eyes softened, but only slightly. No, Daniel, you grew it. My husband built it. Daniel was escorted out of the very room where he had laughed just hours earlier. The door closed. Maria took his seat at the head of the table. She looked around at the executives, some ashamed, some relieved. This company will succeed, she said firmly. But from today forward, we build it with integrity. No employee will ever be mocked for their position again. She paused. And tomorrow, I'd like to meet with the entire cleaning staff. I believe I owe them a raise. For the first time that day, the room filled with genuine applause. And somewhere in the city, a former billionaire learned that respect is worth more than power, and that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one who holds it all. Daniel Whitmore had never walked through the lobby of his own building as a stranger, but now, as security escorted him past the marble floors and towering glass walls, employees avoided eye contact. Some whispered, some stared. One janitor, a young man pushing a cleaning cart, paused and looked at him, not with anger, with disappointment. The elevator doors closed. For the first time in 30 years, Daniel Whitmore had nowhere to go. 3 days later, every major business headline screamed the same thing. Whitmore Tech CEO removed in shock boardroom coup. Mystery shareholder takes control. Who is Maria Alvarez? Maria didn't give interviews. She didn't celebrate. Instead, she went to work. She reinstated employee benefits Daniel had cut years ago. She reopened scholarship programs Raphael once funded. She introduced profit sharing for lower-level staff. Morale skyrocketed. Stock prices rose. Investors praised the new ethical direction. Whitmore Tech began to look less like an empire and more like a legacy restored. But not everyone was celebrating. Daniel sat alone in the dark, city lights flickering through the windows. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. Finally, he answered. Yes? A calm voice replied. You don't know me, Mr. Whitmore, but I know what happened. Daniel's jaw tightened. Congratulations. We believe Maria Alvarez acquired those shares illegally. Daniel froze. What are you talking about? I'm saying, the voice continued, that with the right legal pressure, she could lose everything. Silence. Daniel's heartbeat quickened. And what do you want? He asked. We represent parties who were more comfortable with your leadership. Daniel understood. Old investors, competitors, men who thrived under ruthless leadership. We can help you reclaim your position. the voice said softly, "but we move quickly." Daniel walked toward the window, staring down at the city he once ruled. "They humiliated me," he muttered. "Yes, and revenge is most effective when unexpected." Daniel closed his eyes, then said the words that would change everything. "I'm listening." 1 week later, Maria stood in her office, Raphael's old prototype framed behind her desk. For the first time in years, she felt peace. Her assistant knocked urgently. "Miss Alvarez, there's a legal team here to see you." Maria frowned. "Legal team?" "They're filing an emergency injunction." Her heart skipped. "For what?" The assistant swallowed. "They're claiming your majority shares were obtained through unlawful financial channels." Maria's expression didn't change, but her hand slowly tightened around Raphael's old blueprint. "Who's behind it?" she asked quietly. The assistant hesitated. "It's being funded by a private investment coalition." Maria already knew. "Daniel," she whispered. Daniel stepped out of a black car, wearing a sharp suit once again. Reporters rushed forward. "Mr. Whitmore, are you attempting to retake control of the company?" He paused dramatically. "I'm simply ensuring that Whitmore Tech operates within the law." Cameras flashed. "And if wrongdoing is uncovered," he added calmly, "I will do what's necessary to protect the company." Protect. The irony wasn't lost on him. But this time, he wasn't laughing. Maria sat alone after everyone left. She opened a locked drawer in her desk. Inside was a thin folder. Raphael had kept copies of everything from the early days: contracts, emails, private notes. And at the bottom, a signed document, one Daniel had forgotten about. Her eyes scanned the final paragraph, and slowly she smiled. "Checkmate," she whispered. The next morning, the entire board gathered for an emergency session. Daniel entered confidently, flanked by high-powered attorneys. Maria arrived moments later, calm, composed. The lead lawyer stood. "We are prepared to present evidence that Miss Alvarez—" Maria raised a hand. "Before you begin," she said smoothly, sliding a folder across the table, "I believe you should review page 17. The lawyer frowned, flipped the page. His face went pale. Daniel leaned forward. "What is it?" The lawyer looked up slowly. "Mr. Whitmore?" "What?" "This document, if verified, transfers controlling rights to the Alvarez estate permanently. It appears you signed it yourself 30 years ago." Daniel's blood ran cold. "That's impossible." Maria met his eyes. "You should have read the fine print." Silence swallowed the room. The board members stared at Daniel. The lawyer closed the folder. "There's more," he said quietly. "If this is authentic, Mr. Whitmore may be personally liable for fraudulent removal of a founding partner." Daniel's world tilted. Maria stood. "I never wanted revenge. I wanted justice." Security stepped closer again, but this time, it wasn't clear who they were there for. The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the back walls. Cameras waited outside. Headlines were already drafted. They just needed the ending. Daniel Whitmore sat at the defendant's table in a perfectly tailored suit, but this time it didn't feel like armor. It felt like a costume. Across the room sat Maria Alvarez, calm, composed, unshaken. The prosecutor stood before the jury. 32 years ago, she began, Whitmore Tech was founded by two men, Daniel Whitmore and Raphael Alvarez. A screen lit up behind her. Old photos appeared. Two young engineers in a garage, smiling, hopeful, equal. The prosecutor continued. Mr. Alvarez designed the original operating architecture that made the company successful. Mr. Whitmore handled investor relations. Another document appeared, a contract, signed by Daniel Whitmore. The courtroom leaned forward. This agreement, the prosecutor said, clearly states that in the event of forced removal under manipulated board influence, controlling rights revert permanently to the Alvarez estate. A quiet gasp rippled through the room. Daniel's jaw tightened. The prosecutor walked closer. 3 years after this was signed, Mr. Whitmore privately lobbied board members, misrepresented financial projections, and pushed Mr. Alvarez out, while concealing this clause. She paused. She buried it. Daniel's lawyer stood. Objection. Overruled, the judge replied firmly. The prosecutor's voice hardened. And when Mr. Alvarez died believing he had failed, Mr. Whitmore became a billionaire. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Mr. Whitmore, the prosecutor said calmly, did you know about the reversion clause? Daniel adjusted his tie. No. She walked toward him slowly. You negotiated the contract personally. I signed hundreds of documents in those years. You expect this court to believe you didn't read the one that determined control of your entire company? Daniel's voice rose slightly. It was standard language. Maria watched him carefully. The prosecutor's final question came like a blade. Did you remove Rafael Alvarez because he lacked polish, or because you feared he held more control than you? Daniel hesitated, just for a second, but that second was enough. The prosecutor called one final witness, a former board member, elderly now, nervous. He adjusted his glasses before speaking. Daniel came to me privately, the man said. He told me Rafael's health was declining, said the company needed stability. Maria's eyes widened. He showed us projections. Later, we found out they were altered. The prosecutor stepped forward. Altered how? They exaggerated losses, made it look like Rafael's leadership was hurting the company. Daniel's composure cracked. That's not... But his voice faded, because deep down, he knew it was true. 3 days later, the courtroom filled again. The jury entered. Daniel stared straight ahead. On the charge of corporate fraud and fiduciary manipulation, we find the defendant, a pause that felt like eternity, guilty. The word echoed. Daniel's shoulders dropped for the first time in his life. The judge continued. Mr. Whitmore is ordered to pay restitution to the Alvarez estate in the amount of $2.4 billion. Additionally, he is sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Gasps. Cameras flashed wildly. Daniel didn't move, didn't argue, didn't shout. For the first time in decades, he was silent. As officers approached, Daniel turned. Maria, he said quietly. She walked toward him, not with anger, not with triumph, just closure. I never hated you, she said softly. Rafael didn't either. Daniel swallowed. I built everything. Maria shook her head gently. No, you took everything. Security placed cuffs around his wrists. Cold metal. Unavoidable. As they led him away, he glanced at the courtroom doors, the same type of doors he once walked through as the most powerful man in every room. Now he walked through them alone. 6 months later, Whitmore Tech was renamed Alvarez Technologies. A new plaque stood in the lobby. Founded on integrity, built on partnership. Below it was a photo of 2 young engineers in a garage, side by side, equal. Maria stood in the lobby one evening as employees left for the day. A young janitor passed her. Good night, Miss Alvarez. She smiled warmly. Good night, and thank you. Because she meant it. Every role mattered. Every person mattered. And somewhere in a quiet prison cell, Daniel Whitmore finally understood something he never had as a billionaire. Power can buy silence, but it can never erase the truth. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end. If this story moved you, surprised you, or kept you hooked, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you love powerful, emotional stories like this, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Your support means everything, and I truly appreciate every single one of you. See you in the next story.